Hi, thank you everyone for joining today's webinar on emerging digital technologies for post-2020 climate markets. Before we begin, I would like to go over our housekeeping rules. So please make sure to mute your audio and turn off your video. We have our live poll and Q&A on Slido, so you can scan the QR code with your phone, or you can visit slido.com and use the code EMERGE20. And let us know which country and sector you're joining from. You can submit your questions through Slido, and we'll answer them after all of the presentations, and you can also upvote other questions. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our I4C website later. If you're sharing on social media, please use the hashtag #InnovateForClimate. And now I'd like to turn it over to Martin Weinstein from the Yale Open Lab to moderate today's webinar. Martin, to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to start such an important, timely, and exciting conversation in the intersection between technology and probably the future of climate markets as it pertains for the next 30 years in the context of the Paris Agreement and how it's been transitioning from where it's been. And I cannot think of a better panel and a better group of people to be able to at least helping moderate to have this discussion. We'll start first with a brief presentation, and then we'll move into the specific panel where each one will provide their own perspective. And so the presentation will start by Keisuke Liadomi, who Keisuke will be talking about, in some sense, the landscape. Will help the audience and us get into the conversation, the role of emerging digital technologies for post-2020 as a logic and what that looks like. That will help us a lot in the process of jumping into the specific discussions by the other three panelists that I'll introduce soon. So Keisuke has recently joined the Carbon Markets Innovation Team at the World Bank, and he was previously working in the South Asia Disaster Risk Management and Climate Unit, but he's been working in climate change and carbon finance in South Asia since 2012. And prior to joining the bank, he worked at the Asian Development Bank, assisting CDM project development. So he's got a good grasp of how climate markets were run in the context of the Kyoto Protocol. So perhaps he can give us a good context to help us drive the conversation thereafter. Keisuke, please go ahead.
Thank you, Martin. Very nice introductions. So good morning, good afternoons, good evenings, everyone. So my name is Keisuke Iadomi. I'm a climate change specialist at Carbon Markets Innovation Unit of the Climate Change Group at the World Bank. So to start off our today's sessions, I'd like to give you a quick introductions of needs and challenges for the post-2020 climate markets, as well as potential opportunities coming out from digital technologies. So first of all, we all know that we have a big goal in order to limit global temperature increase up to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So, and if we really want to minimize all kinds of climate change impacts, and with the possible adaptation or reducing efforts which can be applicable. So what does it mean that, so by 2050, we have to reduce the global net emissions to zero. So that requires a lot of transformational and rapid shift towards more low carbon economy, or even net zero economies, behavioral changes, and emerging technologies, and even so, innovative solutions that are not happening yet. So what is the role of climate markets, especially talking about carbon pricing instruments such as emission trading systems, carbon tax, or offsetting crediting mechanisms in this context. So as you might have attended the previous IPOC seminar or seen that latest report of state and trends of carbon pricings that were published earlier this year, so more countries are expecting to develop and implement carbon pricing instruments to some extent. However, in terms of global carbon pricing is quite low. It is estimated at like $2 per ton at this moment, according to IMF. While we are expecting that this should be actually at least $40 to $80 per ton by 2020, and even higher by the 2030s, which is up to $50 to $100 per ton. So obviously that we are expecting that markets will link some of the effectiveness and efficiency and the scalabilities of all kinds of actions to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in order to achieve that our ultimate objectives. However, as you might have seen from the current trends and the expectations in the futures, so what is the role of the climate markets to play with in the next 30 years? And what is the gap that we are seeing from now on? And what are the gaps to be filled in the next 5 to 10 years? So this is our big question that I would like to discuss with you together with our experts presenting at today's session. So just to follow on what is happening right now in the era of post-2020 climate markets. So just to quickly compare for the easy comparisons between the Kyoto Protocol, which is, as you know, that this is the Kyoto Protocol that governs our climate change globally in the last 1990s and early 2000s. Now, with the Paris Agreement, I'm not going to go that in details on each element, but one thing that is clear from, as you can see from this table, is that under the Paris Agreement, countries are expected to achieve their own commitment as part of the nationally determined contributions. If they will, and if they wish, they are planning to set up some certain type of carbon instruments in accordance with the relevant rules and procedures, which is the Article 6 under the Paris Agreement, then they could be a buyer or seller or both to trying to use those instruments as a cost-effective means in order to achieve their own target as part of their commitment of the Paris Agreement. So at the same time, we are seeing that a lot of countries are already designing or maybe under consideration to implement some of the carbon pricing instruments, given that even though there is no detailed rules and procedure already in place, but they are expecting that these carbon pricing instrument is effective tools in order for them to achieve their own target under the Paris Agreement. So this is also formulating the markets from the bottom up. So another question here is that, so the bottom up climate market is country we have seen is it really working well, or the different market is disrupting each other? So that's another question that we like to pose. So just for the illustrative purpose, I just put the climate markets very simple and 4 categories. On top, the government. On right, some of the actions or mitigation activities. And the bottom, some of the players who are utilizing these carbon markets for their own commitment. On the left-hand side is actually the global governance in order to ensure that climate markets are working very well. So here's the challenges and needs. One is that the governance and institutions, as I mentioned in the previous slide, so the detailed rules and procedures under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is not yet finalized. At the same time, countries are already starting to initiate some of the carbon pricing instruments, based on their best understanding, or things that expecting that how the rules and procedure will taking in place in the futures. So some of the countries may be more conservative, or maybe a little bit scared that they're not going to overstep, or they're not going to set up rules on the procedure infrastructure that are not in compliance with the expected rules and procedures in the futures. So what we are seeing is that whether the approval process in order to ensure the mitigation outcomes from the climate market is really applicable to use for other climate markets. Whether the infrastructure necessary for the new market is really set up in order to track different carbon assets from the different markets, in order to avoid any type of double counting, to make sure that the new emerging climate markets is ensuring the environment integrities. So the next question is the credibilities and the quality itself of the carbon assets generating from different markets. So how do we ensure those high qualities and the credibility of those markets? So we need to have a good assessment in order to make sure that these mitigation outcomes are properly evaluated, so that even though these assets is coming from different countries, different markets, but this is still applicable in order for other countries to use for their own achievement or something else. Again, in terms of efficiency of the market is definitely relevant to actual emission reductions in order to make sure that these outcomes, emission reductions, are properly monitored and reported and verified. Without robust framework in place, that it's going to be very difficult for us to assess whether this mitigation outcomes or has the qualities and are credible enough to transfer to some other markets. So lastly, not the least, the climate market is still narrowed market. In the previous slide, mentioned that there are some countries already consolidation of the carbon pricing instrument. Some countries are already implementing some of these. However, as you can see from the previous slide, the current market is still covering only 22% of global GHG emissions. That means that there are still space, or maybe the space where countries are still able to participate in the future markets, and then try to use that as a cost-effective means in order to reduce their own emission reductions. Again, the smaller coverage of global emission is that maybe some of the important players are still left out in order to capture those emissions, potential emissions in the futures, like SME sectors. They may be, for the various reasons, they are not really able to tap on some of the potentials and opportunities from the future climate markets. And then probably, even though we are not really looking at the good potentials of individuals who can also contribute to bring some of the additional resources, or maybe some of the additional effectiveness to the market by tapping on those potentials as well. So in a way that the challenges and the needs of the current market coming out from the bottom up is quite huge. So the other questions that we like to pose here is that in order to make sure that the comparabilities and transparencies and liquidity of the carbon assets coming out from the different markets, it can be ensured so that this can be used for their future the markets and the scale up. So here's the questions. What are the digital technologies that are emerging is pretty much applicable in order to help us to have better transparency, comparabilities, and liquidities of the carbon assets from the bottom-up markets. So here's the thing that I just like to keep a little bit attention that, and then our panelist is going to have more detailed explanations and some give examples and lessons learned. Just 3 points I just wanted to make here is that, so digital technologies that we are talking about, which is happening in the different sectors like manufacturing, industries, health, or maybe insurance sectors. Those emerging technology is to an extent helping the sectors more engaged and bringing some of the smart governance and bringing some of the effective monitoring system which is necessary for the making the market more effective, efficient, and smart enough to ensure that market is working well. So these are a couple of technologies that I just wanted to quickly touch upon, but just to give you a couple of examples, so digital platforms, blockchains, as you can see that this will help some of the better information flow and the better management of those a huge amount of data that is necessary for the markets to be worked out. And when it comes to the carbon markets from the bottom up, these technologies may be helpful for us to have better infrastructures or better MRV and registry system in order to make sure that carbon assets that will coming out from the different markets are communicating in very well. And artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data, and those technologies are quite relevant, as you can see that at a level of activity level. So this is already happening right now, that and then helping some of the mitigation activities, because that this will reach out some of the untapped potential emissions reductions by having some more smart metering and optimizations of the use of energy and so on. So so this is the couple of technologies that we can foresee that there is a potential and this is happening, and then there may be some challenges on top of the market itself is having and struggle, but at the same time that these technologies may be helping the future markets to be more engaged and to be more faster, smarter, and more efficient in order to address some of the challenges that I mentioned in the previous slide, and trying to help increase of transparency, credibilities, and the liquidities of the carbon assets in the future markets. So with that, I'd like to stop here and then hand over to the panels of experts and then give you more thoughts and lessons learned. And thank you again for attending this interesting sessions. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Keisuke. It's a great way to start the next session. You've given us a very good overview on one side of the political and climate market context. We are having some audio issues in the background, so hopefully we can take care of that. Make sure that if you're muted, thanks. So in some sense, listening to your presentation, you've given us a context of the new landscape of the climate market world. On the other hand, all the different elements that have to be perfectly orchestrated to ensure that there is trust and that those markets do indeed work. And obviously the set of, let's say, toolbox that we can now use to ensure that. Now, all of that needs to be properly, like you said, orchestrated in a seamless, almost airtight way, and almost literally airtight, because all of the work within climate markets needs to be able to aggregate to improved mitigations, and that falls directly into our single carbon budget, which is definitely one of the things that that as we move through markets and mitigation outcomes, we're constantly will have to look at. So for the next and almost the main part of the show today, we have three amazing speakers. Each one will be providing a bit of context from their direct line of work into specific use cases where leveraging digital technologies are particularly applicable to this new landscape that Keisuke introduced on climate markets. They won't be sharing screens, so it will be more of a bit of a So I'll introduce the speakers right now. And first, we'll have Owen Hewlett, who'll speak about next generation carbon standards and registries. He is the Chief Technology Officer of the Gold Standard Foundation Switzerland. Gold Standard was founded by the World Wildlife Foundation and other NGOs, particularly to demonstrate high environmental integrity in the clean development mechanism. So back within the Kyoto context, and today continues to lead in voluntary and compliance markets and corporate and NDC reporting through its Gold Standard for Global Goals framework. So Owen leads the foundation's standards development and innovation policy, which is an exciting job because gets to have a look at all these new set of toolbox, and perhaps that's a good way for you to, Owen, to start. Our next speakers, Marion and Susan, I'll introduce soon after, and particularly how it connects with Owen's presentation. But I think that that may be a good point for you to kick off.
Yeah, thanks Martin for the introduction, and thanks to the I4C team and the bank for sharing your platform today. I'm immediately trying to figure out how to share my slides as we go into a technology-based presentation. Hopefully that can now be seen. So hi, yes, I'm Owen from Gold Standard, and indeed I think what we want to go through today is really how do we create the standards platform to deliver on some of those tricky risks and opportunities that Keisuke outlined and Martin outlined. I'm going to focus primarily on how we as a standards system are thinking about that big sandbox of technology opportunities moving into that brave new world. And my friend and colleague Marion at our certification partner Sustain Cert will look at the middle of the pipe, which will make more sense in a minute. But I'm wearing another hat today as well, that of the Climate Ledger Initiative, which is a partnership with our friends over at Infras, some of whom I think are joining us today. If you want to learn more about the Climate Ledger Initiative, please do take a look at the website. We're really focused there on research and knowledge cases, but also looking at innovative use cases. And it's been a huge source of inspiration for me in my work at Gold Standard, and also to engage with some of the folks on the panel today. Climate Ledger actually publishes annually a state and trends report called Navigating Blockchain and Climate. I would say, despite the name there, actually we're very interested in a broad range of technologies. None of the CLI partners are particularly susceptible to hype, and one of the things that I really took away when first getting involved there was at the time around the hype around blockchain DLT is that it's not really a panacea that's going to resolve all my headaches as a standard setter. In fact, I've got many headaches and there isn't really a magic bullet out there that will take them all away, I'm afraid. But if you do want to take a look at some of the work Climate Ledger has been doing, there's a lot of really excellent, exciting use cases like the wood tracking protocol in Peru that a colleague is working on, like the open surface system that's looking at data in forestry and agriculture, and like some of the work we've done with our friends over at EBRD on renewable energy. And I really wanted to share this primarily actually because CLI, with backing of the Swiss government, is actively looking for use cases to engage with and test and implement. And there's some details there on the screen. I'm sure we'll share these afterwards, but you can also find them at the CLI website. But onto some of my headaches as a standard setter, and having learned from the various errors and great work, to be fair, in the last 20 years of carbon markets. We see kind of really three big issues. I think we're all working in threes today, mirroring Keisuke's presentation. And you know, there's probably a rationalization of language to be done here, because I think we all come at it in a similar sort of way. But the issues very much interrelate, which is why I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all technology that will make all the challenges go away. On the one hand, we see issues of trust and credibility and barriers to entry. A lot of projects in historic carbon markets rely on manually collected data and manual assurance. And, you know, not to say that manual isn't a good thing in some cases, but clearly it leads to issues of security, corruptibility, gaming, fraud that we need to absolutely stamp out of all markets. We also have issuers, I've kind of phrased this quite euphemistically, flexibility and interoperability. Again, I refer back to Kesuke's excellent presentation to say that there's no hiding from the fact now that our markets, plural, will interact and somewhat begin to clash with each other and with climate finance and with NDCs. Double counting is where the rubber hits the road, if you like. But I think the opposite side to thinking about that as just a risk is also that it's a huge opportunity, that we want to give proponents, by which we could mean projects or countries or corporates, the flexibility to use their opportunities, their projects, their data in the ways that suit them best, in a smooth kind of system that allows you to go, I'm reporting this against my NDC or my science-based target, but this part of it I'm going to finance through Article 9, or this part I'm going to finance through Article 6 or voluntary carbon markets. You can only do that with interoperability, and interoperability starts with interoperable data, that we're thinking about data in the same way and our systems can parse it in the same way. And then lastly, because I think we can think about future market challenges only sometimes with a risk hat on. I know I do that if I'm not careful, but there's huge opportunity here. So the data that we generate in that interoperable way can very much be used to improve the actions that we're working on, to optimize the impact that we're having through ongoing learning. And also, in a really kind of more prosaic way, historic climate markets, carbon markets issue assets in arrears. So a project might come to me with 3 years worth of monitoring data, and it will get issued 3 years worth of carbon credits. And its most valuable but will be the carbon credits associated with the most recent period. And usually the least valuable is the one from 3 years ago. By moving to this brave new world, what we hope to be able to do is ultimately automate this process and issue in real time, just using that as an example. And that means, this is a horrible word to describe it, but you kind of always have fresh carbon credits or fresh assets that are at their peak value at the time of issuance. Now, the middle block there, the kind of mystery block in the middle, is governance. Clearly, to make all of that work, we have to work together as a community and we have to govern well. Otherwise, clearly lots of these great ideas will fall by the wayside. So, data, interoperable data, and strong governance at the heart are really at the key to unlocking all of this. These are all themes, as I said, that the CLI is covering, and you can learn more via our reports over at the website there. And I talked about a pipe metaphor, to use a different metaphor. We very much see the world of standards and monitoring, reporting, verification, certification, the issuance of asset as a kind of rolling pipeline of mitigation action that kind of goes through the grinder and comes out of the other end with carbon assets of some kind. And that's why really this illustrates nicely, I think, that there isn't a technology that I can point to and say, blockchain solves every single one of these issues that I have. It clearly isn't going to work like that. There is clearly technology that isn't as whizzy and exciting, but is much fitter for purpose. But really what it points to is a need to interlock and interoperate good technology for different good purposes. I want to focus on the beginning and the end of the pipe. So really the smart standards and methodologies there in the gray at the beginning, and then come back to registries before I pass to Marion to look at the the middle of the pipe. So looking at digital standards, again, here, not a one-size-fits-all technology, but what we're giving a lot of thought to at the gold standard is how do we digitize or create digital versions of our standards. So if you look at the gold standard for the global goals that Martin mentioned, we, I guess, unusually, if you think about other standards worlds like ISO for manufacturing, or some of our colleagues at ICEAL sustainability standards, we cover a lot of bases in climate. We have a forestry angle, an agriculture angle, an energy process angle, but then, if that's the horizontal, the vertical is also impact, carbon impact, adaptation impact, SDG impact. There's not really another comparable broad-ranging standard suite like we have had to develop. And I say we in the community here rather than just at gold standard, but clearly it's, we cover a lot of ground between us. And so the digital standards have a lot of work to do. They have to make sense of which parts apply to which activity and which asset in a really intuitive way. So something we're doing, giving a lot of thought to at the moment is how do we make our standards more legible and accessible and kind of instantaneous. Then we have the methodological side. So the methodologies themselves are complex. Each individual methodology is often as complex as a standard in another system. If I think about the methodologies for things like clean cooking or forestry, there's a lot of detail, a lot of expertise in those. How do we automate those? How do we make it more intuitive to capture that calculation? So using things like, or maybe not the actual technology, but inspired by things like smart contract, how can we apply that in the world of methodologies? And then tools. So how do we create online platforms for reporting of impact? So there's, the 17 SDGs themselves are individually complicated, but they need to be more legible. Ultimately, I think underpinning this is two things, one of which I'll come back to in a moment on registries. One is, how do we make this intuitive and legible so that not only do we avoid some of the pitfalls that Keisuke pointed out, but that we are able to explain it transparently so it makes sense. If Greenpeace look at our system and go, how on earth did you make that decision? We can actually point to the way that decision was made in a really quick and intuitive and transparent way. Then at the other end of the pipe, the registry. So ultimately, you do all of that to issue something, whether it's a carbon credit, whether it's a report for science-based target, whether it's a climate bond. Ultimately, the other end of the pipe is the registry system. And having that interoperable registry system is essential, and it has to be underpinned by both interoperable data standards, so principle, things like the digital principles for data, and then it has to be some way of interoperating the dispersed, decentralized registries that we all operate. So there's not a world in which there's one magical registry that suits everybody. We, for various governance reasons at Gold Standard, have to have our own registry, but we know that we operate in a bigger sandbox that we have to work with colleagues at other standards and other systems. But I think that's kind of the more prosaic stuff. Actually, the really interesting thing is, how can we use that to tell stories? So at Gold Standard, we invest very heavily. My team is just about the largest, but the next largest is the communications team. And there's a real good reason for that. It's not just a back of house function at Gold Standard. We see it that it's essential to be able to tell the story of the impacts that we are having. And so this is a kind of visual from our digital registry system that's underway, thinking about how do we leverage the really good branding at places like the SDGs and create something that's intuitive from a technical perspective, but is also able to go and sell, for want of a nicer word, the story to the wider world. And really, just to wrap up and a summary from my side, what are the benefits of doing all of that work to digitizing MRV? We, in a kind of cascading way, think there's a leveraging of technology to automate the monitoring reporting that happens at the climate action level. If we can automate the way it's collected and calculated and reported, we minimize cost and error. That in turn allows automated verification and certification that Marion will talk about, not necessarily needing to send somebody to site periodically, and to think about how we move from a linear milestone-based verification to one of real-time issuance. That, as I said earlier, increases the value of the assets that we issue and allows us to interoperate, allowing proponents to have flexibility of which type of asset they issue and not be forced into one action equals one type of asset, but actually allow the action to choose in kind of real time to be able to do that. And that all in turn allows us to share data, which does a real service, I think, to the sector, in that through that data, we can design better actions. So actions are not in isolation. If you have this kind of analytic capability at your fingertips, it can improve the way we develop clean cook stove projects. It can improve the way we think about forestry projects and actually make the next round of projects better for that learning. So that's really what we're trying to do at both CLI and in the context of Gold Standard. And I'll stop there and I'll pass to Marion to talk more about the MRV part of that. Marion, just let me know when you want to scoot on slides. Yeah.
Thank you, Owen. I'll make a quick segue because in some sense that was a perfect also landscape view from the pipeline as Owen mentions it, which in some sense is the whole life cycle assessment of a climate market transaction. But in the middle, and obviously there's applications of technology all throughout, in the middle of the pipeline, like Owen mentioned, that's where perhaps Marion territory comes in, the process of certifying, of ensuring that the action is actually taken. So Marion will speak about the digitization of MRV and her certification process. She's the CEO of Sustained Cert, a company with tech-driven solutions to verify impact in climate protection, but also supply chains and investment products. She's been working a lot also previously in carbon market. So very important, how does the robust certification lead to mobilization of capital? And prior to launching Sustained Cert, Marion was officiated as the CEO of Gold Standard Foundation. So very, very tight colleagues there, and a perfect segue to, in some sense, wrap up that whole pipeline that Owen was alluding to. Marion, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thanks, Martin, for the introduction, and thanks, Owen, for doing such a great job at laying out the key issues and the key solutions there. So what I'm going to do is really focus on the monitoring, reporting, and verification process here, but really recapping on what we're trying to achieve. Succinctly, what we want to do is to leverage technology to, on one hand, really enhance consistency and accuracy of decisions and of numbers, and on the other hand, reduce cost and reduce complexity for all users. So we're really trying to unlock a double win there. So there are three things that I'd like to talk about over the next few minutes. I'd like to talk about the opportunities from a technology perspective first. Then I'll talk about one barrier that I think, at least in my view, is the biggest barrier to implementing and technology adoption. And then finally, I'll just share a very brief overview of how we think such a technology platform and digital process can be leveraged to create a rating system and what would be the benefits for it. So if we move to the next slide, starting with the opportunities from a technology perspective, we really see three broad functions that MRV is doing. It's capturing data, it's quantifying greenhouse gas impacts, and it's doing it in a way that's independently verified. And so we believe technology can be leveraged to make those three functions much more efficient. So starting with data capture, and some of the examples were already mentioned by Owen and Kisuki. So I'll go quickly over those three sort of broad leverage points. If you move to the next slide, Owen, on data capture, but just to give you a feel, what we see is critical here from a data capture perspective is really to combine the technology solution on one hand, for example, sensors, with data analysis tools to make sense of the data and provide useful information. So there's a really interesting case study in the last CLI report that was published last year on Next Leaf, Stairway to Scale, where it's really interesting to see how the combination of sensors with data analysis tool is actually providing really useful information on cookstove adoption rates. There are also a number of really interesting use cases on the forestry side where satellite imagery can be used for forest inventory. But then if you couple that with algorithm, then you can get a really good estimate of tree growth rate. So really the combination of new technology and algorithm or analytical solution unlocks really interesting opportunities to make sense of the data. And then obviously from a renewable energy perspective, I think we're all aware of the potential of smart meters to allow for live sort of monitoring of energy production in a way that's extremely sort of robust and really sort of reliable. So these are a few examples of how data capture can be done in a different way, and how, coupled with data analysis solutions, it can really unlock really useful information that would make household surveys or field visits in many cases irrelevant. So moving on to the next slide, Owen, and looking at greenhouse gas quantification. So we heard from Owen about digital standards. Sustained Cert is convinced that we really need to move the entire standard and certification process to digital platforms. If you think about the way greenhouse gas emission reductions are calculated right now, it's extremely old school. Project developers and auditors are basically using Excel spreadsheets. And the Excel spreadsheet of an afforestation-reforestation project is massive. And this is what is used by all parties involved in the process to get a sense of whether the output, i.e. the number of emission reductions, is sensible and accurate. I think we can do much better than that. So once the standards and the methodologies are turned into a digital software code, then what's really interesting is that you can plug onto that a simple sort of app that would run the numbers for you. And that app can include already default values that the user, the project developer, wouldn't have to really worry about. That could be set by the standard, or that could be set by the certification body if they are, for example, region-specific or city-specific. And then those greenhouse gas quantification apps would pull the monitoring data from the digital data capture solutions that I just talked about and produce greenhouse gas emission reduction numbers. We shouldn't be using Excel spreadsheet to do those calculations anymore. There are much better ways of doing that. And the beauty of the software solution there is that you can really have different users control different parameters. So the fraction of non-renewable biomass in a cook stove project example could be set by the certification body depending on the country. There could be a certain fraction of non-renewable biomass for a certain list of countries, and that parameter could change depending on the country. You could have the same with, for example, the deforestation rate. And then users may still have an opportunity to change those default values, but they would have to provide evidence as to why they're asking for a deviation. That would make the entire process of verifying greenhouse gas quantification much easier. Moving to the next slide, Owen. And that's really the final touch, which is, I think, full of promises. It's smart verification. I don't talk about automated verification because I do think that it's not going to be fully automated, at least in the first phase. We see automation at the project level verification, so leveraging the data capture and data analysis solutions coupled with greenhouse gas quantification apps. Verification at project level can be automated to a large extent. But we would still want to have a second layer verification when we would do a portfolio level verification. So you could run a coherence algorithm or identify outliers or high variations to a benchmark. And that could be another form of verification. And then the third layer would be either on a sampling basis, on a risk-based approach that would be triggered by the second layer. You would mandate field visits. If you have a big outlier in your portfolio that's yielding a number that's not coherent with the benchmark, then you would mandate a field visit. And that would be the only project in that portfolio of similar project type that would have a field visit during that period for a risk basis. Field visit could also be determined on a sampling approach, saying that 1/5 of the project needs to be audited or visited every year. So those parameters, again, can be set at the outset. But we believe that the 3-layer approach could really unlock extremely smart verification, robust outputs at significantly reduced cost. So that's a very short glimpse of what we think technology can do and how we're approaching it at Gold Standard and SustainCert. A brief word on the biggest buyer before I talk about the rating system. For me, it's important to say this because I don't think technology is the buyer. I don't think finance is the buyer. The reason why the market hasn't made the most of those solutions to date, in my view, is because there's a lack of a coordinated market level change management approach. And that is key because for it to work, you need very close collaboration between certification bodies like SustainCert and the standard body like Gold Standard. If we can't agree on what technology we're going to use for what purpose and what that means in terms of updating the rules, then those technology just aren't usable at all. So there needs to be really close collaboration between standard bodies, certification bodies, and leveraging the experience of project developers and auditors on the ground. And that close change management approach is essential for technology to be adopted quickly and at scale. And so that's our commitment, and that's also why I think the collaboration between Gold Standard and SustainCert is extremely powerful, and hopefully can set a precedent and a blueprint for how to do it in practice. And so the final sort of message before I hand over to Martin and Suzanne, it's really, if you think about that digital standard and digital certification platform and the different modules for data capture, automated or software-based greenhouse gas quantification, and then smart verification, you can, and maybe if you can move to the next slide, Owen, you can start to picture a process that's becoming fully digital, and that becomes much more objective or even completely objective, taking out subjectivity from the decision-making and the process, and really running a process that's fully objective and data-based. And that can create a wonderful opportunity to build on top of it a digital rating system. We see a rating system for carbon offset really as a complementary solution to next-gen MRV, because it could enhance the transparency and create comparability in the market. As Keisuke said at the start, this is much needed to scale markets and to get to the scale that we need. And really that sort of rating methodology could be one additional algorithm that would give you an environmental integrity, sustainable development, and governance evaluation of your mitigation outcome, mitigation unit, and then provide that comparable benchmark for buyers to make decisions depending on their motivation and depending on the market in which they want to operate. And so we're looking at that as one add-on to the digital certification platform that could unlock sort of additional value and contribute to the similar objective of bringing transparency and comparability in the market.
Great, thank you very much, Marion. That was very, very rigorous as well. And it's kind of amusing that some of the things you mentioned obviously require a bit of more of the cutting edge technology, but some other not. I mean, we still use a lot of Excel and a lot of the implementation. So there is not just the need for emerging digital technology, it's just the process of digital transformation that we've been seeing in every sector of the industry, that it just needs to permeate itself into the sector as well. And that with the role of emerging digital tech, the ones that have yet to achieve mainstream maturity, those are also very important and interesting to look at how they can address some of the core issues. And definitely here also I can't think of a better speaker to usher us into that discussion, because we mentioned blockchain a bit already. Owen mentioned it in the context of his talk, and so our next speaker is Susan Sarevich. She will be speaking about distributed ledger technologies and their uses in climate markets. Susan is actually one of the co-creators of the World Bank Group's blockchain lab, and has been with the Technology and Innovation Lab since its inception. She's contributed use cases and research on use cases on blockchain, focusing on digital identity, climate, and energy. So it really provides a bit of a landscape, but also a specific application for this technology. And she's actually on a short-term assignment with the carbon market and innovation team to bring that expertise to the climate market effort from the World Bank, the Climate Warehouse. Please go ahead. The floor is yours. I am picking up some audio background. I don't know if anyone should be muting themselves, or hopefully that's not an audio issue on your end, Susan. But let's give it a try and see where it goes.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I hope it's not on my end, but let me know and I can potentially transfer to my phone. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the positive ways that distributed ledger technology can impact post-2020 or climate markets, and also talk about some of the caveats of the technology that my colleagues on the webinar have also mentioned. So just to start out with a brief introduction on what the technology is, distributed ledger technology, such as blockchain, provides the means to share and record transactional information among partners without central intermediaries. The nature of the technology prevents network partners from changing past transactions and securely saves information. Depending on the purpose of the blockchain, all of this information can be transparent and visible to participants within the network or to the general public. So this is why blockchain technology is quite interesting and why so many different organizations have been looking at it in the context of post-2020 climate markets. Some of the key differences of post-2020 climate markets and those based on the Kyoto Protocol, just to highlight some of what my colleague Keisuke mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. There will be more participating countries with registry systems that will need to be integrated. The bottom-up approach of the Paris Agreement means that cooperative approaches will be negotiated without a central authority for managing transactions and ensuring that transactions are not traded twice or double counted. A network built on the principle of decentralization that provides security and immutability has the potential of providing this robust infrastructure that could be needed to support cooperation between partners. Now, let me talk about a couple of different areas where DLT technology could make a positive impact. So I know my colleagues have been focused on 3. I think I will probably mention 4, but I will try to keep them short so that we have time for some questions. This technology could enable tracking of carbon and other types of climate assets to ensure that they aren't double counted or spent within disparate markets. Participants could observe within the system how various organizations are utilizing these assets and following established rules of cooperation. The World Bank has been engaging with country ministries and partner organizations to prototype and actively test these concepts through our Climate Warehouse project. By sharing or participating in a climate ledger, participants can have easy access to data in partner registry systems to verify information about climate projects and the resulting assets, and potentially integrate this information into their own systems and use it to check on the integrity of information. This can cut down on the auditing time needed to verify information about a project or unit, and ultimately its cost. Shared ledgers enable different forms of accounting because all participants within the network are sharing their accounting books. This can lead to the possibility of recording and accounting for much more information on how value can flow between participants. Such information can provide the ability to determine qualitative differences between assets within the ledger. Factors such as independent benchmark activities or co-benefits that were mentioned in earlier presentations can be additional transactive records associated with assets, visible to market participants to assist their decision-making for the purchase of these assets. Rules, or in the language of blockchain, smart contracts, can also be created within a blockchain system that specifies how assets can be utilized or if they expire. Many of the initiatives using blockchain are creating tokens using blockchain technology to support market activity. A blockchain token can hold information about the token, such as information pertaining to its issuance, such as emissions reductions information. It can hold vintage information, information on the location of the token, information that you would want to travel with that token as it moves between different partnering registries. This is similar to the way serial numbers or other information on paper money or other physical products work. They're identifying features that enable market participants to understand what the origin is of a product. And they enable climate market participants to understand the origin of a token or a climate asset and its impact on the market value. The nice thing about these tokens in the blockchain environment is that they can't be duplicated. So they can't be double spent or sold twice. The characteristics of these new assets can be used to determine their usage as well. So creating those rules through smart contracts to determine how they can potentially be spent. Lastly, to join in on the conversation a little bit on MRV, Another usage of blockchain is to hold hashes of information. So a hash is a key value that is used to take a large piece of information. You can create a hash out of it or a series of numbers and use that to compare that information against the hash in the future to ensure that it hasn't been tampered with. So this is technology that's built into blockchain and other DLT applications, but it's also a technology that can be used separately as well. It's very useful in testing how much information has changed from one version to the next, or if it has changed at all. From an MRV perspective, data collected from emissions could be hashed and stored on a blockchain or other kinds of measurements for climate projects. And then when that MRV process is going to start, auditors or those involved in the process can test the data, ensure that the data has not been tampered with before they begin their processes. So those are some areas that I wanted to just touch on how blockchain or distributed ledger technology can assist climate markets. I'd also like to discuss some of the caveats as well, because I'm a firm believer, as Owen is, that it's not a panacea to resolve all of these problems. So DLTs can be created to be inclusive and lead to cooperation and more collaboration between entities. This is an achievable goal, but it requires buy-in and governance run by participants, so they are incentivized to maintain and support the infrastructure. It's much easier to support a centralized infrastructure when there's clear ownership and one organization is deciding all of the rules. Problem with that, though, is that if you want collaboration and cooperation amongst partners, these different partners probably need to be a part of that governance structure and assist in the decision making and the decisions about the network and the support and the data models and all of those factors of integration that Ellen discussed. It will be difficult to maintain trust and buy-in from stakeholders who fully participate if they are not involved in the governance process. As with any technology, blockchain also continues to evolve, and upgrading the technology is always challenging, not only for decentralized or distributed ledger technology, but for other technologies as well. Change is rapid, and this can impact the longevity of solutions. This also means that finding the right technology expertise can also be a challenge as the field continues to evolve and technologists have to continuously upgrade and learn to keep up with their skill sets. Increasing work is being done on creating blockchains that can integrate with each other, but this is still a challenge when ledgers utilize different types of blockchain technology. Tokens don't transfer easily between ledgers, at least not yet. Lastly, an internet connection is needed to save data to a blockchain. I know this seems like an obvious point, but if you are using blockchain to store information from projects where there isn't a lot of electricity or not a steady internet connection, this can be a problem. If a connection is not available, offline solutions will be needed that can be used to prove that data was not tampered with. For governments, it's difficult to contemplate investing in emerging technologies for climate, and when there are so many other priority areas. However, technology infusion can provide the push to do things differently than they were done before. And by investing in these technologies, a country can move away from a business as usual and begin to future-proof themselves while investing in their own people with transferable tech skills that can be utilized for climate markets and all other business areas that are transforming due to digital technology. So the usage of emerging technologies in developing countries can be fostered through partnerships and piloting activities that build capacity for all involved, increase dialogue amongst participants, and foster and involve the talented, skilled resources already present in these countries. An example of this type of partnership and capacity building activities is what we're trying to do with the Climate Warehouse Project, where we are collaborating and partnering with countries on the functionality of the warehouse and utilizing a phased approach to test jointly how such an integrated system could work. The climate is not an area that is not limited to single sectors or single skill sets. Investment in emerging technology can build efficiencies and accuracies into climate markets. It is the same technology that can be used to analyze data related to supply chains, efficiency of transport, and energy. Data that can be used to analyze projects can also be used for understanding climate-friendly agriculture practices, clean water, and ultimately the health and well-being of people. And on that comment, I'd like to close and hand it back over to Martin.
Great, thank you very much, Susan. And that was definitely a great overview of the technology. And I think you mentioned a couple of really important points that cross-cut the whole conversation, which is things are constantly evolving, and they're evolving on the policy side, and they will continue evolving on the regulations side, but also on the technology. So the systems, the integrated systems that we design, have to be designed for adaptation and evolution. We are moving now into the Q&A section, and hopefully here we will have Polo or Isabel sharing the screen. There you go, with some of the questions from the audience. I would like to ask our three panelists first to unmute themselves so they could be part of a more dynamic dialogue. But I did have a quick question maybe for all three of you, which is, you've talked about some pretty, let's say, forward-thinking models and cutting-edge technologies in the context of developing countries or less developed countries. How does this, they might find this a bit overwhelming, or they might not be able to deal with that level of technology and maybe reticent to participating. What comments can you give in the context of bringing in emerging digital technology in a global system where you have more and less developed countries? And that's open for any of the three. And then after that, we'll just start picking up some of the questions that are on the screen.
So Martin, I'll start with that one. As I alluded to a little bit earlier, by developing partnerships and collaborating with the countries and sharing capacity is one way of doing this. With some of the projects that we are doing at the World Bank, we are trying to co-create with different countries and collaborate with them together on the different models so that they learn how it's done. We're sharing resources and ideas, and each partner can understand the context of the different partners and what will work within their own systems. So this helps us to build more robust and flexible models that can benefit each of the different countries and other participants.
Great, and I think that also covers a bit of the second question. Owen, Marion, feel free to jump in as well.
Happy to comment on that, and I think there's a couple of other questions on cost savings that I can cover as well. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that developing countries are less rapid at adopting new technologies. We've seen impressive sort of new technology adoption rates in developing countries. I think we've seen some of them leapfrog directly into mobile phones and new technologies. So I do think that in many cases, the adoption can be extremely rapid. And some simple technologies can take us a long way. As Martin and Susan said, we're not necessarily talking about blockchain. We're talking about mobile phones. We're talking about sensors, smart meters, and those are already being deployed in most developing countries. On the cost savings, we are producing our own cost saving estimates, which are project specific. So you won't achieve the same cost savings for a renewable energy project than for a cook stove project or forestry project. But our top line goal is to reduce cost and time in half. We do see the two major cost savings associated to monitoring cost. And so that includes cost associated with establishing a baseline to cost associated with doing the annual monitoring, so household surveys and things like that. So obviously those costs would be different if you're doing a distributed energy technology solutions or working on a renewable energy sort of grid-connected type project. And then the second type of cost that we think can be significantly reduced are annual verification costs. From a timeline perspective, we're looking at having a fully digital certification platform in the next 24 months. But we'll be releasing project-specific modules every 6 months, starting during the second half of 2021. But we'll communicate in collaboration with Gold Standard a more sort of detailed timetable towards the end of this year.
That's a great point. And did you there's a other question I think there for Assistant Senator on how the proposed change work will with the current Gold Standard. I don't know if that's something that you want to cover as well, or while you're on it.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, maybe that's one for you, Owen, but I don't think Gold Standard is financially dependent on a handful of carbon consultants. I do think that many Gold Standard project developers or project implementers, I should say, rely on the help of carbon consultants. And so obviously with digital MRV solutions, the reliance on external consulting support will be significantly reduced. But I don't think it's accurate to say that Gold Standard financially depends on consultants. But happy, Owen, for you to jump in here.
I mean, no, I'm not much to add to that, really. I'm not sure where that comment comes from, but yeah, no, that's clearly not the case.
Great. We have also an interesting question in terms of Article 6, which is, does the current Article 6 text around infrastructure requirements, whereas registries and registry systems, does it allow for technological innovations like blockchain? Perhaps that's something that I guess all three of you, even myself, I could probably speak to that if you read the text itself. But maybe give a comment on the context of blockchain in Article 6.
Sorry, Susan, did you want to, otherwise I'll have to say a few words. I think, I mean, this relates to the first question as well, Martin, that, you know, in a way, we're trying to hit a moving target from a moving train, in the sense that not only we're trying to pick up the technology battle, but there's also a shifting policy landscape that's not fully realized yet. And I agree with Marion, by the way, that developing countries in a strange sort of way, developing some of that infrastructure for the first time, have a kind of an advantage in the blank canvas sense. Not to say there's obviously other challenges that they face. I think it does. Blockchain certainly does. I mean, I said earlier that we you know, we're not big on hype at GS or CLI, but I mean, clearly, I think for the key characteristics of immutability and traceability and security, you know, instinctively, even blockchain seems to have a role to play in providing registry infrastructure to not only Article 6, but other forms of reporting as well. There are other technologies that can do a similar job, is all I would say. And, you know, we shouldn't kind of, you know, assume that a technology is the right one. I think, to me, the bigger issue around Article 6 is really still the fact that some of it isn't pinned down, which makes, you know, trying to pin down the technology to meet it from the other direction quite difficult to leverage still.
Great. Susan, anything to add? And definitely, I also want to echo a bit of what Marion mentioned in terms of the relationship between developing countries and digitization and the process of leapfrogging, but also a great point around Article 6.8, which is non-market cooperation, which in some sense, that can lead to technology transfer. And also in that is the line of open source technology, where you can definitely set up in one environment an open source solution, and that can easily be replicated elsewhere. And I think that we hope to definitely see a lot more democratization of digital infrastructure in that sense. Susan, maybe you can have some comments on blockchain Article 6.
Yeah, I agree with Owen that there's, I mean, if I'm going to answer that question directly, there's nothing in the article that would preclude technology innovation. In fact, I think it fosters that, and looking at different technologies that could work. Part of this is with trying to pilot these different technologies and learn which ones might work in different circumstances. And I agree that blockchain isn't the only one that can do this, but it's one that we're currently experimenting with, just to learn more about it and its features.
Great. We kind of covered and touched on the second question on the countries with limited experience, but happy for you to continue giving us a stab at that. We have another rising question. I mean, there's a comment here for Owen on EBRD, but that doesn't seem to be a specific question on that. And feel free to talk about that, Owen. But the other question is, how will collaboration between standards and other standards develop in light of this tech development and interoperability? And I think that maybe it's a bit of the box in the middle that you had on governance, and in our work at the Yale Open Innovation Lab, we talk about radical collaboration. Perhaps that I think all three of you can speak a bit about what are the challenges and what have you seen worked in the past and going forward.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Martin. I think just briefly on Dimitri's EBRD comment there. So those guys did some brilliant work presented in Madrid on dashboarding renewable energy data, which to me I think demonstrated a lot of what I was talking about, a lot of what Marion talked about, and how you can use that kind of analysis in real time. It really kind of demonstrated the potential to issue in real time, which was super exciting. I'm not sure if Dimitri has got a publication he can link to in the chat, but I think if he has, I would definitely recommend people take a look at that. That was really good. On radical collaboration, I love it. We actually do coordinate and collaborate with Vera and the other standards, ACR, CAR, on various forums and working groups. We have a kind of we're all non-profits. We all are totally happy to discuss key thematic issues in the market. It certainly wouldn't make sense for it to be competitive in that sense, and certainly wouldn't make sense for it to be one player only. That's not a great market. Actually, I think to give kudos to colleagues at the World Bank, I think actually the bank has done a brilliant job of creating exactly that kind of forum, understanding which issues are cross-cutting and that we all need to try and align behind, and bringing us all together. So I would give kudos to my colleagues at other standards who were willing to engage with us, and vice versa. But a special kudos to the World Bank. Sometimes I think there's a right organization to pull that together, and I think in this case it's been the bank.
Absolutely. Isabel, I'd love to know how we're doing on time, to see if we can keep picking up some of these questions. There's one there for you, Marion, if you feel like going for it, and there's another question.
Yep. Happy to talk about it, and it's interesting because in the early days of CLI we had that conversation, right, on what technology at what point in the process. And the way I see it is that I see the upstream process, which is the process that really starts with data capture on the ground and ends with the issuance of the carbon credit, and then the downstream process, which starts at the point when the carbon credit is issued and ends at the point when it's retired. And when we were starting to look at technologies, what technology for what part of the process, it became clear that the upstream process could go a long way with simple technologies, IoT and things like that blockchain could play a role, but wasn't a panacea and could maybe come in a second stage, that there was already a lot we could do with other technologies. But for the downstream process, i.e. the demand side, the transaction, selling of carbon credits, I do see quite a big role for blockchain. You could think about ways to link every credit card transaction with the purchase of an offset, or you could have really interesting functionalities to allow for the consumption and trading of offsets in a way that would be seamless using new technologies. So I think the potential is really significant. But again, what's lacking, it's not really the technology. I don't think it's the buyer. I think the buyer is really on the communication and marketing side. So telling a story that would make everyone want to buy an offset at the click of a button, or every time we're buying or making a consumption decision. And that is really the bottleneck and the behavior change that we need to drive, and technology will support it, it's there. But change needs to happen in people's mind and behaviors first.
Absolutely, and irrespective of how Article 6, the nuances get defined and technology progresses, one of the key things that happens here is that we have to remember that everyone is, let's say, accountable to keep their type of emissions aligned with science-based targets, and markets can help achieve pledges, but not if we are not doing our internal adjustments to science-based targets. And it's really exciting to see how this progresses over time. Because the other thing that we know that Article 6 will require is linkage of these actions to the inventory that will give a lot more strength and power in and how that plays out. I think the next couple of years will be particularly exciting. I think we're almost out of time. Perhaps this is a good time to thank particularly all of our speakers, Keisuke, Marion, Owen, and Susan. It's been a pleasure, and like I said at the beginning, very timely discussion that I think ideally helps replicate other discussions by other folks that are also in the sector that they need to tune into some of the things that we mentioned here. So with that, I'd love to leave the last words for Isabel and to wrap up the session today. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you, Martin. This is Paula. And I'd like to thank Martin for moderating today's session and also for all the speakers speaking today. Please contact us if you have any questions. As we said in the beginning, this session was recorded and it'll be available on the Innovate for Climate website. So please visit us at www.innovateforclimate.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn at Innovate for Climate to see our upcoming webinars as well. And I'd like to end it there. So thank you everybody for joining.